Alright, so the next step is we're going to do a little bit of masking off. We are going to use some blue painter's tape here, and we are going to mask off along this line we drew 5 inches in from the edge, from the left hand side. Whoop. And we are going to mask off the top and bottom. And I'm just going to run it right along parallel to the bottom of the page, and that's just going to give us a little bit better proportions for the picture that we are drawing and ultimately painting. I'm not going to mask off the right hand side because there's just not enough room there for it, but this is going to be the space in which my painting is going to take place, so I really want to take a moment and really press down along that taped edge so that I don't have paint seeping under that edge. And then I'm ready to begin. Now on my paint palette, I actually have a fairly limited palette here. I've only picked out 7 colors that I think I'm gonna need, and they're pretty standard. I've got just a pretty basic red, blue, green, violet. I have black, I have a brown, and the only color that's a little bit unusual is a yellow ochre, which I'm going to need for the lower part of the building. If you don't have a yellow ochre, you would just need a dulled yellow, and that would just be a little bit of yellow, or some yellow with a little bit of violet mixed in, and that's enough to dull that yellow down so that you get more of a neutral, which is what we're going to want for this particular occasion. So that's my palette. I have 7 colors. I've grabbed a handful of different brushes here, some round, a large round, a small round, and some even smaller ones, and then I have a couple of flat brushes, which I like to use to do detail work. But the area I'm going to start is the sky, because that's a quick way to see some success and to feel like, hey, I'm actually accomplishing something here. So I'm going to get some just plain water on my brush, and what I'm going to do is I am going to essentially outline the building with water, trying not to get water where I'm not painting sky, because the thing about watercolor paint is that it likes to bleed, and it will bleed pretty much anywhere that there is water. It's going to travel through the water. And I'm sort of avoiding those areas that I left, that I drew in as to be my bright white. And it's not such a big deal that I'm real precise in that area. It's more important that I'm precise along the building edge. And if you have a loose bristle, make sure you pull that out of there. Around my clouds, I can be a little bit looser because I'm really not so hung up on the precision around the edges of the clouds. They're clouds, after all, which means they are organic in nature, irregular in nature. There's nothing really precise about them, and they change, right? Even though this is a still image, clouds in general don't stay the same very long. Okay, so I have defined the edge of my building, and that's the main thing that I want to make sure I do, and that was just plain water. So on my palette here, I'm going to get some water and then just get a little bit of that blue into my mixture, and I'm going to really hit those darker blue spots. One coat is probably not going to be all I do here, but one coat is all I'm going to do for the time being. So this is something where I kind of build up my color over time, especially since I've wetted that area and created a wash. And my paint is a little bit stiff, so sometimes you have to, depending on the paint you're using, you have to kind of work there. See, now we're starting to see some pigment show up. You have to kind of work that water into the paint to really get that pigment to show up. Now, skies are a fun thing to paint, I think, because we do not have to worry about getting any kind of precision in our texture because it's a sky, right? So it's intentionally going to be a little bit blotchy, right? And it's okay to have inconsistency in how you apply that color. All right, and then as you get close to that white cloudy area, just get a little bit of water on your brush and just kind of take it right up into that cloudy area. So we don't mind a little bit of blue in there. We want a little bit of translucency, meaning we want to see the white showing through, but we don't necessarily want it to be perfectly white the whole way through, because clouds are translucent. We can see through them and see that blue sky behind them. Okay, so that's just kind of a starting point on our sky. And that is not the ending point. That is the starting point on our sky. Okay, now we're going to actually get into our violet. Now, depending on how purpley we want it to be or how pinky we want it to be, red violet actually, we can pick up a little bit of that red into our mixture until we get what we're going for. There's a couple of places we're going to need red. One of them is this corner here. So we'll go ahead and, while we've got that color mixed up, I'm going to let that ride there. But I actually want to get a little bit more purple in my mixture. And some more water, because I want this to be kind of a translucent color. And that's the color I'm going to use along this top stripe. Whoops. I'm going to set that round brush down for a second and get my flat brush, because I just love a flat brush for getting some precision. I turn it sideways, and that allows me to get a really nice crisp edge, as you can see. Now, is there going to be some purple down in this part here? Yeah, sure. It kind of gets a little bit more blue as we move down, which hopefully you can see that. But the top here is going to be the most kind of pink, so to speak. And watercolor is really pretty forgiving. You can continue kind of moving that color around as long as you've got a little bit of water on your brush. And of course I'm trying to be careful along that edge, but it's okay if I'm a little bit off. Okay, so I've kind of blended that edge, and now I actually want to get a little bit of blue in this mixture. A little bit blue. And I'm going to kind of dull that just a little bit, believe it or not. So I'm going to get a little bit of that yellow ochre. And that's going to neutralize my blue. Sometimes we end up with colors that we didn't anticipate. But that's what happens when we start mixing all these colors together. All right, let me see how this looks. A little bit dark. Yeah, it's not so bad. Okay. And of course, the more water in the mixture, the more translucent the color is going to be. Meaning I can see through it. And in watercolor, if I could see through it, I'm seeing the white paper underneath, and that essentially has the effect of lightening my color because it's whiting the color, whiting out the color. And I'm pretty happy with that color. I want to actually carry it a little bit up into that top zone there. Don't want to get rid of the pink entirely. I like that little bit of a pinky purple up there, but I want to carry that up there a little bit. And then a very similar color shows up down here between the windows. Again, that flat brush is my favorite brush because it just gives us a ability to be real precise about our beginning and our ending point with our color. So that is one of my favorite tools, is the flat brush. I'm having to be a little bit careful to avoid that. You might notice I carried that over a little bit further than I meant to. This is a great time to grab a little piece of paper towel, and it's okay because a lot of that will get covered up, but that will help pick up some of that pigment that I accidentally squished out of there. All right, I'm going to carry this same business over here to the right side of the building. And one thing you hopefully can see when you're looking at the example, and it's a good idea to have it in front of you when you're working, is that this right side is darker than the left side. Why is that? Well, it's the side that is in shadow. So we can be a little bit less translucent and use a little bit more pigment in this area. Okay, and of course we're going to carry it right up in to that top section. Try to get a crisp edge there, but you know, it's paint. It likes to move around. Sometimes where we want it to, sometimes not so much. All right, now I'm into the trees there, so I can not have to worry so much. If I see any bit back here that's, I think, still part of that same section, then I'll jump in there and work on that. But that's pretty good for right now. Now if you look closely here, we actually see this same purple kind of shows up right here along the bottom of the picture, which kind of ties it all together, which is nice little detail. We'll blend it out, of course, when we get into that yellow ochre color. And we don't want it to be just like a stripe here, so I'm going to get a little water on my brush and just kind of try to smooth out that line so it's not quite so abrupt. Okay, I don't quite see so much of it there on the right side, so I won't worry about that for right now. Hey, while I've got that purple, let's get a little bit of color on this guy back here. Just being careful, of course, to avoid dragging my hand through it later, like I've done on some of these other things. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to switch over to a small round brush at this point, but sometimes I just get carried away. While I'm in that same family, let's get some blue, pick up some blue, and let's do these windows. The nice thing about these windows is that they're kind of a reflection of the sky. So maybe that might be a little bit dark there as we go over closer to the front corner. It seems like it lightens up a little bit, but no worries. Just a little bit of water fixes that. And notice towards the top of the windows there's a little bit more white showing, a little more of the cloud cover. So just kind of let that stay a little bit white up there. And just letting it be a little bit more translucent the closer we get here. And let that have kind of an irregular shape here as well. All right. Pretty good. Blue, what other things are blue? Well, this car is blue. And look how fine a detail I can get with my flat brush. To me, I can just really control where that paint goes. If I'm trying to get a real narrow space, to me, I feel like I'm able to do that better with a flat brush than even a skinny round brush. But use what is comfortable for you. If you like a small round, then use a small round. Just depends on your own comfort level with the brush. Okay. And then looks like we have that similar but maybe even a little bit darker color happening in the doorway. So I'm gonna get a little bit of black into that same kind of blue purple color that I'm playing around with. Maybe even a little bit more. Really kind of go dark there. So it's not straight black. It is got a little bit of that blue and violet in it. And that's okay. Kind of like that. Just a little bit kind of dulled. So we don't necessarily want to use just straight black here. And we can kind of come in here, get a little bit of color on our trash can. We might be able to clean that up a little bit better once that red paint, that purpley pink paint, oh no, it's bleeding, is dried. And of course I can always go in and just dab that and come back and fiddle around with it later when I am ready to do so. So I'm just taking a look here and I feel like I'm in pretty good shape on the building itself. Now let's think about the parking lot. The parking lot is really the same kind of a tones. The darkest area, of course, is going to be to the right. It's in shadow. So this is going to be where we're going to have the mixture that's the most black, but not pure black. We're not using pure black really for anything. We're still using that combination of that blue, violet mixture. We're just going to go the darkest here along that right side of the building that is in shadow. We're going to kind of move that brush side to side. Another dark area is going to be underneath the cars. Right in here. It's going to be pretty dark. And again, I like to use that flat brush and just kind of drag it side to side to get kind of close detail work. If I'm trying to get a precision line, I like that flat brush, but a small round would work. All right, well, we don't want to let that black just stay black. So what do? We pick up some other colors. That purple is a nice blend that I can bring in. This might be a good time to pick up my round again, my big round, because I'm covering a large surface area. I like to go right up to where I left off with the last color because I like to sort of blend out that hard line. With watercolor, one really nice thing is you don't have to have really hard lines. You can always just come in with a little bit of water and maybe a little bit of a different pigment and soften. Kind of pick up that pigment and move it around a little bit. Okay, this brush is really shedding, which is problematic. Maybe a little bit of pink in our mixture to brighten it. Maybe even a little bit of that yellow ochre in a couple places where we see just a little bit more of a neutral. Don't let it just be one thing. If you look at the inspiration image, it's really an interesting combination of colors, considering it's a parking lot and you tend to think of it as just being pretty flat. In this case, it's not so flat, one color. It is kind of an interesting blend. So let that be something you can play around with a little bit. And until you're happy with. Okay. All right. Let's see what we'd like to tackle next. I think we'll hold off on a couple of areas in the building. I like to do this bottom section before we do our trees. And right now I don't really want to drag my hand through that paint that I have just done. So I think this is a good time to just stop, let this all dry, and come back and play around with it at a later date.